The drama continues with the SNC-Lavalin affair. We heard from former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould, then the PM's former Principal Secretary, Gerald Butts, and recently the Prime Minister said he disagreed with the comments from his former Justice Minister. Joining me now from Ottawa with the latest is our parliamentary reporter, Ray Filion. Ray, the Prime Minister says he will not apologize since he believes he really did nothing wrong.
Absolutely. You know what? You don't see an 8 a.m. news conference very often on Parliament Hill, let alone one featuring the Prime Minister. But that's what we had on Thursday morning here in the nation's capital. Justin Trudeau absolutely wanted to give Canadians his side of events, his take on what happened between September and December of last year when they were in the midst of discussions with the former um, uh, not Auditor General, but the former Attorney General of Canada, Jody Wilson-Raybould. We didn't learn a great deal of new information for Justin Trudeau, but he basically said that the whole thing was a big misunderstanding between colleagues who were discussing a very sensitive issue, the future of SNC-Lavalin. He said he and the people in his office thought that Jody Wilson-Raybould was very much receptive to some of the stuff that they were telling her, trying to convince her to have a second look at SNC-Lavalin, the whole file, the corruption and fraud charges that the company is facing, because it's a big file. It's a big company for not just Quebec, where the company is based, but for the entire country. We're talking about 9,000 jobs from coast to coast to coast. The Prime Minister didn't apologize, but he did offer a bit of a mea culpa. He said that he wasn't aware that the trust between his office and the former Attorney General had broken down, and that he should have been aware of that as the Prime Minister, as the head of the government. Mr. Trudeau, though, didn't convince opposition parties. They say it's absolutely unacceptable that the Prime Minister wasn't aware that trust had broken down between his office and the former Attorney General. But now that Justin Trudeau has said, his piece in all of this, now that his good friend and longtime advisor Gerald Butts testified on Wednesday in front of the Justice Committee, Mr. Trudeau's office hopes that they can move on, but fat chance of that. The opposition parties, they absolutely want to do everything in their power to keep the story alive for as long as they can.
Treasury Board President Jane Philpott resigned recently, and Ray, that deals another big blow to the Trudeau Liberals.
Absolutely, because Ms. Philpott was one of the most respected members of Mr. Trudeau's cabinet. She worked on some major files since 2015. She was health minister, so she had a role to play in the whole assisted dying legislation. Same thing for cannabis legislation, legalization. She then became responsible for a very important portfolio for the Prime Minister. She was named Indigenous Services Minister, and then she was shuffled to Treasury Board, which made her the third most important cabinet minister in Ottawa. So yeah, it took a lot of people by surprise when she resigned on Monday. So now it's not just one cabinet minister who resigned. We're talking about two. A lot of people noted that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are very good friends, but still, it doesn't minimize the importance of this seismic shift on Monday when Jane Philpott resigned. And she wrote Jody Wilson-Raybould wrote on her Twitter some very nice words for her colleague after Jane Philpott's resignation. She said, to the incomparable Jane Philpott, truly the mother of Canada, you're a leader of vision and strength, and I look forward to continuing to work alongside you. Love you. So some solidarity here between Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Ray, the Liberals shuffled their cabinet, and word is another cabinet shuffle may be forthcoming.
Yeah, because after Ms. Philpott's resignation, the Prime Minister named Carla Qualtrough as head of the Treasury Board on Monday. Now, it's an interim position because Ms. Qualtrough is already a full-time minister. She's in charge of government services, so there's going to have to be yet another shuffle. Can you imagine? We're only in early March, and this is going to be how the third cabinet shuffle that we've had since 2019 began. We obviously had the one in mid-January on the 14th, the infamous one when Ms. Wilson-Raybould lost her job as Justice Minister and Attorney General. We had one last Friday to replace Ms. Wilson-Raybould at Veterans Affairs, and now we're probably going to get another one Chances are it's going to take place next week, just before the House of Commons resumes after 2 weeks off. Justin Trudeau obviously would like to have all of his ministers in place for the big day on the 19th, which is going to be budget day in the nation's capital.
Now, there's a new report out saying the Liberals are considering two different portfolios, one for the Attorney General and Justice Minister, not one person with both. What are you hearing?
Well, yeah, and the Prime Minister confirmed as much during his news conference on Parliament Hill on Thursday morning. He says that a lot of people have been calling on him to do just that. Some former parliamentarians, they say that in Britain, for example, the two roles are separate. It would only be logical to do the same thing here in Canada, because right now you have a situation where the Attorney General is also the Minister of Justice. That person sits at the cabinet table where a lot of political discussions take place about different issues which involve the judicial department. So they're saying that the Attorney General shouldn't be at the cabinet table, should be completely apolitical. So this is something that the Prime Minister is seriously considering. And he said on Thursday morning that they've actually asked for outside legal opinion as to whether or not it'd be a good idea for Canada to imitate what Great Britain has been doing for many years.
The clerk of the Privy Council is facing calls to resign, and you have the latest with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Michael Vernick is the top civil servant in the federal bureaucracy. Some opposition MPs didn't like his first testimony before the House of Commons Justice Committee, where Mr. Vernick offered a very staunch defense of the government in the whole SNC-Lavalin Jody Wilson-Raybould affair. He was back before the House of Commons Justice Committee on Wednesday afternoon, but he denied being partisan. He said, and I quote, "I'm disappointed to be accused of partisanship by people who have never met me. My career is on the public record. I've held the highest security clearances of this country for many years. I was named deputy minister level positions by Prime Ministers Chrétien, Martin, Harper, and Trudeau." So he says he's not political. Opposition parties have accused Michael Vernick of being too partisan in his first testimony. So he said he's not going anywhere, and there's no indication right now that Prime Minister Trudeau wants to show him the door. Although there are rumors in the nation's capital, those rumors have been going around for a while, that he's about to retire. So this could be one explanation why he decided to testify the way he did a couple of weeks ago.
Ray, a controversial tax here in Alberta is the carbon tax. Many homeowners and businesses are hurting as a result. Our Prime Minister was basically planning a tour promoting the carbon tax, but he didn't get very far. Tell me more about that.
No, he went to Toronto, and that was it. He had a couple more destinations in Saskatchewan on his itinerary earlier this week. A partisan rally, a Liberal rally to promote the carbon tax and the Prime Minister's green policies was held on Monday night in Canada's largest city. Problem for the Prime Minister was that some anti-pipeline protesters showed up during the rally. They started shouting at Mr. Trudeau while he was delivering his speech. And that was Monday night, just a few hours after Jane Philpott has resigned as Treasury Board President. I thought that Mr. Trudeau made a mistake here, by delivering his reaction during that partisan rally. I was expecting that the Prime Minister would have reacted, in a quiet room before that rally with reporters. Instead, he decided to do it while people were cheering for him, and a lot of other people were jeering him during that rally. There was even some pushing and shoving during the event in question. So it was a very bizarre scene. The next day, he was scheduled to go to Regina to take part in another similar event and also visit a Canadian Tire store to highlight his green policies. But that event got a kibosh. The Prime Minister decided to come to Ottawa instead to deal with the SNC controversy, which by now we can call, I guess, a crisis. The funny thing is the Prime Minister's office say they're the ones who decided to cancel the Canadian Tire event, but there were some people on social media saying that Canadian Tire is actually the ones who called it off, because they apparently got quite a few complaints with angry customers who weren't happy with the idea of the Prime Minister visiting their favorite store. But Mr. Trudeau's office maintains that it was their decision to cancel it. So, yeah, Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax tour was a bit of a bust this week.
It's interesting. A fellow journalist friend of ours said to me once, a lot of dramas following Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, but what do you expect from a former drama teacher? Lots of drama, right?
Yeah.
Now, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has a unique suggestion for Justin Trudeau with regards to China. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, he was in the nation's capital on Wednesday to give a speech at the convention center here. As you know, John McCallum, Canada's former ambassador to China, was fired last month by the Prime Minister after some controversial remarks that he made. Canada is currently represented in Beijing by a chargé d'affaires. There is no full-fledged ambassador representing Canada there. So Brian Mulroney says that Canada should look at the possibility of naming a special envoy to China, and he suggested the name of Jean Chrétien, one of his successors. That took some people by surprise because the two weren't known to be exactly friends. But Mr. Mulroney said there could be other people, but in his view, Jean Chrétien would be a good candidate for special envoy for Canada. He's someone who knows how governments work, how international affairs work. He's got a high profile outside of Canada, so he suggested Mr. Chrétien. And one more interesting note where Brian Mulroney is concerned, how he expressed optimism on Wednesday that the Trump administration will soon lift its much despised tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. And as you know, he's been involved with the Trudeau Liberals in some high-level talks with the Americans on the issue. Mr. Mulroney has also known the current American President, Donald Trump, for more than 20 years. So he says he's optimistic. We'll see, obviously, what happens.
Yeah, that'll be great for our steel and aluminum producers, the 25 and 10% tariffs. Andrew Scheer has unveiled an interesting campaign promise this week. What does it entail?
He's promising that if he becomes Canada's next prime minister, his government will take the GST off heating costs. And they're talking here about electricity, natural gas, and so on across the country. The CRA under the plan would actually reimburse customers the 5% HST that they currently pay on those heating bills. The rationale here is heating your home is not a luxury. It's an essential thing. You have to do it. There's no GST right now on many essential products. So why not remove the GST on home heating products? This is something that will only apply to home heating. We're not talking about businesses here. They wouldn't get that rebate. And the Tories say that the average household in Canada would save $107 a year with that measure. This is a measure, according to the Conservatives, that would cost the federal treasury $1.6 billion a year.
But that's a campaign promise I could definitely get behind. Our parliamentary reporter, Filion, joining me once again from Ottawa. Thanks so much, Ray.
My pleasure, Hal.